We talk and use the term systems change a lot, but we don't realize enough that there are different levels of a system. And so as you think about systems change, you need to think a bit about, are we talking about the individual level of that system, which we call the micro system? Are you talking about the organization level as a part of that system? Or are you looking at the larger system, what we typically refer to as the service delivery system? When we think about outcomes, we really need to think about individual outcomes. We need to think about organization outcomes, and we need to think about system outcomes. Because if you're going to change, the question becomes, what criteria are you going to use to evaluate whether or not the change is effective? As you think about what is it that people with disability and families are really most interested in, we have to think about where does their interest come from and how is that expressed? And I'll call that the input. And what we've come to realize is that if a system is going to be responsive to that person, at the micro level, at the organization level, at the systems level, then we have to think about what are the personal goals of that person and what are the support needs of that individual. And then what we do is to attend as best we can to meeting those goals and providing the individualized supports that are going to enhance those goals to be fulfilled. Typically, the fulfillment of the person's goals you can refer to as an outcome. And those outcomes can relate to what we frequently use as quality of life domains. We can talk about an outcome of personal development, for example, where the person is learning skills, is becoming more independent in their functioning. We can talk about self-determination as an outcome, where we're looking at the person making decisions and having choices and doing choice making or supported decision making. We talk a lot about social inclusion, involving people, but not just in the community, but being of the community. We talk a lot about interpersonal relations, where individuals have friends, they have family, they have close loved ones, etc. And then we talk about rights, and that's where the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities has made a major international contribution to thinking about not just the rights of individuals, but what do we expect if those rights are honored. And the work that we have done from a quality of life perspective in reference to the UN Convention is that the 34 articles that you find within the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities fall nicely within the 8 domains of one's quality of life. So I've already mentioned a few of those domains. We still have emotional well-being as a domain of quality of life. People want to be content, they want to be satisfied. We have material well-being, where people want a job. Employment First is a major international effort, and of course people want to have physical well-being in terms of feeling well. We live in systems, but we are a part of that system, and so when we think about the outcomes that we want to see from that system, then we have to think about how can we really align what happens at the individual level with what happens at the organization level with what happens at the systems level. At a very elementary and very descriptive level, at the individual level, if we can align the person's personal goals and support needs with the supports that they get, and then look to see whether or not those supports meet the personal goals and support needs of the individual in terms of outcomes, then we are aligned at the horizontal level. Because we can go from the input, the personal goals and desires and support needs, to the support that are provided to the outcomes. And we call that horizontal alignment. Now, organizations throughout the world are really striving with the second kind of systems alignment, and that is to align their services in a way in which their resources are used to provide the supports that the individual needs or wants with outcomes from that organization, which means that they are meeting the support needs of individuals. So that would be alignment horizontally at the organization level. The real challenge that I find in working with jurisdictions and systems throughout the world is that the system needs to support horizontally and vertically that alignment. So that, think about a service delivery system. Now, depending on where you're from, it may be a Ministry of Health, it may be a Ministry of Social Services, it may be a regional program, it may be a provincial program, it may be a state. There are a lot of different kinds. It may be a government, a national government. There are a number of entities that form this systems level service delivery component. But they too have to be aligned horizontally and vertically with what's happening at the organization level and at the individual level. So the question then becomes are systems, governments, jurisdictions, states, etc., are they really devoting resources to the personal goals and support needs of individuals, or are they devoting resources to some other use of bureaucracies, of institutions, of brick and mortar facilities? In other words, where are their resources going? But secondly, at the throughput level, do systems have policies and practices that really support what individuals want? And I think that's one of the big challenges that I find everywhere, and that is systems tend to be more bureaucratic and we can't, as opposed to open and we can. And so one of the challenges that bureaucracies, service delivery systems are facing from an alignment perspective is to change their policies and practices so that they are indeed not just conducive with, but also reinforcing the kinds of things that organizations want to do and the sort of things that people want. A very simple example of that is if you ask the individual at the microsystem level, what's the most important thing in your life? Well, I've asked that question of people with disabilities throughout the world, and they basically want three things. They want a home, they want a loved one, and they want a job. So organizations then are being challenged to provide those three major desires of individuals. The question is, where does the systems level come into that? Is the systems level really supporting the desire of people for jobs, the desire for people to have their own home, and the desire for people to have a loved one and to have intimate relationships? Or are there prescriptions that really work against each of those things? Unless we align vertically from the individual to the organization to the system, then the outcomes that people want at the microsystem level are not going to occur to the degree that they should. And so what systems then throughout the world are beginning to understand is that they need to transform their policies and practices to look at how are they using resources, what kinds of policies and practices are they instituting that really facilitate human growth and development and build on human capacities as opposed to inhibiting those processes, and then do they look at outcomes in terms of what happens to people as opposed to what happens to bureaucracies. And it's a huge challenge. From my understanding from Brian of the intent of this conference, it is to talk about personal outcomes. It's to talk about self-determination. It's talking about supported decision-making. It's talking about the rights of people with disabilities. But the point is that unless we all work together as a partnership in that process and align those things that we do, either at the individual or the organization or at the systems level, to the things that people want from the service delivery system, what they want in their lives, then we'll be here in 5 years at a conference still talking about the rights of people with disabilities.